You're listening to episode number 6 of Actionable Insights. I am your host, Joseph Maxwell. Today, we're going to dig into the story of an entrepreneur who has successfully bootstrapped an artisan business. It sounds kind of tricky, kind of difficult, but she's done this in a way that is very impressive to me. Johanna Miller will be joining us here. She is the founder and chief artisan of potionyarns.com. Feel free to go to her website, potionyarns.com. She started this business with almost no money, and through her creativity, her ingenuity, has built it up to the place that it's at today. We're going to focus on the content management side of her findings, what she's learned over these past 3 years. You might say at a basic level, she sells dyed yarn, colored yarn that you used to make into garments. But the challenge is you can go to your local craft store and buy this yarn for, say, $6, whereas she sells it for maybe $30. So she must have a solid, good market differentiation strategy to be able to make this business a success. So as you listen to this, I'm super, super excited because I think we can learn a lot from the efforts she's put into this business, how she has made it a success, and especially, there's a lot of aspects we could cover, but especially focusing on the content management side. Before we begin, though, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on all the major platforms, Apple and Spotify and Google Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to subscribe and so you can hear more of this great content, this content that I'm super, super excited about and that I think is going to make a difference and certainly add value to whatever you are undertaking in your business online. So, Johanna, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you here. If you want to maybe start out by sharing, how did you get started and kind of that really, it's a fascinating story with what brought you into this business of hand dyeing yarn.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I was knitting just for fun, just for a hobby. I've been doing it for a long time. And I was working as a hairstylist. I'd been doing that for a little over 10 years when I first got into this. And I specialized in hair color. So I did a lot of like rainbow colors, unicorn shades, galaxy hair, things like that. And have been doing that for a long time. I love the creativity. I loved working with color. I loved creating unique custom hair colors for each of my clients. And I got into dyeing yarn because my husband wanted a specific project, and he was very, very specific in the exact shades he wanted to match a painting I had done. And I looked everywhere to try and find exactly what he wanted and couldn't find anything online that fit our vision. And so he finally just asked me if I could dye the yarn like I would dye someone's hair because he knew I could create it on somebody's head if they'd asked for it. And I thought that was ridiculous, but I started doing some research just to see what it would take and kind of like, hey, I think I can do this. It's got a lot of similarities to hair. It's different products and different canvas, but it's very similar in color theory, and some of the chemistry behind it is the same. So I could surely educate myself and learn how to do it. So that was how I jumped off, and it was never intended to be a business when I started. It was just going to be a for fun for me thing. But the very first batch of yarn I did, I had so much fun that I immediately had a million other ideas and had to do more research, and the rest is history.
Yes, well, that's awesome. And it seems like so many times a founder's story starts with somebody who's doing something for fun, or in your case, you mentioned painting, so I'm guessing you're a very creative, artistic person, and so you had people's hair as your one of your canvases, and I assume like actual artistic canvases. You mentioned a painting, so that type of canvas, and now you move into dyeing yarn, and I think it's really cool how you can how that, at least a lot of those basic theories translate, but also and I think the challenge is you always hear the starving artist that those words, but how you have turned this into a business. And obviously there's a lot we could talk about, and how you have been successful at this business. But I have been particularly intrigued over the course of past couple of years since we've interacted about, just business stuff, that you with your website, potionyarns.com, I believe you're hosted on Shopify, right? That's the platform. Yeah. Okay. And so how you have taken this business, have you put it online? And that's, again, there's the whole story there. But ever since the first time I went to your website, I was fascinated when I started reading your product descriptions. And I'll just take a second here. I have to read this because if you go to oceanyarns.com, you'll see a whole bunch of other stuff like this. But when you're describing yarn, I mean, yarn is like a craft item. You would often, what color is it? What's it made out of? Or what material? And maybe, I'm guessing, correct me, would there be other things that just like bullet points that you would use to describe yarn?
Yeah, everybody, basically you want to know the fiber content, how many yards are in a skein, how thick it or thin it is. So what kind of, most knitters and crocheters will look for what's the recommended needle or hook size so they know what kind of project to use it for, those kinds of things.
Okay, well that's good to know. It's be like, just attributes or description for a product, which is good. But I just have to read this. It's here's an example, some excerpts from one of these descriptions. It's I think it was, if I remember correctly, the color was orange. But describing that, what's the best hand-dyed yarn for the fall season? According to Hoyle, it's this beautiful blend of mustard gold, spicy pumpkin, blood red, and rich burgundy that calls to mind autumn leaves, pumpkin spice, and apple cider on a hayride. I'm like, good grief, that's like exploding with pictures. And ultimately, it tells a story, and the story, I believe, is of autumn, and at least I'm guessing for most people, autumn brings back really fond memories. You know exactly what you talked about. Autumn leaves, I remember playing in the leaves when I was a kid. Pumpkin spice, and who would ever turn down apple cider on a hayride? I mean, so it's really positive pictures. How did you come up with creating this, or even think of this? I mean, again, what you described earlier, like you have these bullet points, which are, of course, important to convey. But how did you consider painting a picture with words for your descriptions?
Yeah, well, there were kind of two things that went into that. The first one was, I know that people connect when they buy products. We don't just buy a product, we buy an experience, we buy a feeling. So we need something that people can connect to. Mm-hmm. So I did want to create stories for my yarn because that helps people connect. But also, I did begin as an online business, and that is still my primary source of selling. Even though I will go to stores and do trunk shows or go to events and sell in person, a lot of my business takes place online. And so the challenge that you have with online business is, no matter how great your photos and your editing are, you can have them all perfect on your end, and everybody's monitor looks different. We all know that different settings can change the colors, change the picture. And when you're selling something that is tactile, so they need to be able to feel it. They can't feel it over the internet. And then it's also something they need to be able to see the colors and know if it's going to create the project that they want or match what they're trying to match. You really have to be good about your descriptions. And I knew that the best thing I could do to help people with that was to not rely only on pictures, but to add to that with words. So if I can describe the colors and give a picture, that just helps their mind envision it a little bit more clearly. And so they're more likely to be happy with their purchase in the long run. You're going to have fewer returns, fewer upset customers, a lot more happy people. And then I like to paint that story because, again, the emotional connection, but also that goes along with it. According to Hoyle, is very, very fall colors. It really does look like the leaves coming off the trees. And I wanted to really get that whole experience going so people could envision those colors and think of those types of things in their project.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. And kind of a follow along to that is, so you have this product. How do you formulate the description? What steps would you use in that process?
So most of the time, what I do is I create the colors first, and then I choose the name that goes with it. And I actually keep a notebook of words, phrases, titles of songs, movies, etc., that kind of spark my imagination, or like cool words and phrases that I'm like, oh, that sounds really interesting or intriguing. So I keep a list of those things, and then when I'm naming yarn, if I don't have something that springs to mind immediately, I'll go through my list and see if that sparks any new ideas. And then once I have the name, that will kind of give me the idea of the story. So like I've got a colorway that's called 40 Shades of Green, and it's all these different shades of green, and it was inspired by my trip to Ireland. So once I had the name 40 Shades of Green, it was really easy to go in and create a little story kind of about Ireland and the song 40 Shades of Green and things like that, that help people call to mind the whole experience and idea that I'm going for there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes sense. I like your idea of using time to help inspire creativity, and that's kind of what I heard with with the notebook. So, and it's I don't have an answer for this, but I get an email every morning. It's from Robinhood. They're like an investing app that lives on the phone, and I'm just blown away by the creativity. It's like, how do these people come up with every day something unique, really good pun and some humor in there that turns what could normally be this dry financial email into something that's interesting reading. So much that I actually enjoy reading it every morning. And I think it's the same type of thing as like the continual notes and what inspires you and the parallels that you can draw. And so I think that's a really fascinating idea for the course of time, thinking about this stuff over the course of time to inspire this creativity in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I just named a couple of colorways this fall. I wrote down a couple of colorway names that I just love the name of and I love the emotions that they evoked, but nothing fit them for 3 whole years. And I finally this fall created something and I was like, that's it. That is
Hmm.
going to be called Sorceress. I finally have the color to go with the name. So I
That's outstanding.
create things like that and keep that notebook so that when I get stuck and my brain isn't working right, I can go back to my notebook and it gives me fuel to kind of get the creative juices flowing.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. So the idea there being to use and use a notebook. I mean, again, it's the simplest of all inventions. Use that notebook of yours to write down things that are inspiring, and it might just weave its way into product descriptions. And I think talk about making this practical. That would be definitely one way that would make this very practical and some actionable insight there is to keep track of these things that inspire you. So, quotes that you see in movies or things that just hit you as you're driving, or not physically hit you, but as you're thinking as you go drive down the road. So yeah, and I think that's interesting. And the thing that I find also fascinating is again weaving these stories. So how did you come up with this idea for this product, or what led you to be able to start selling this product? So do you have any ideas to add to that, like as far as making this really practical for writing descriptions that are captivating and interesting?
Yeah. I think people like to know the stories behind the products they're buying, especially with smaller brands like that. So I think letting people into the stories and admitting, even when it's an awkward mistake or something, admitting that or telling them about your inspirations, telling them about why you created this or what you were
Hmm.
thinking of or how you feel when you create this is really going to help to move those products.
Well, that's outstanding. And I think what I hear in what you're saying there is a degree of vulnerability,
Mhm.
because you're putting yourself out there as a person, and that's one thing is I've observed your brand through the website, uh, the descriptions, the social media, how you present yourself. It's I see tremendous continuity through this process, and it's not like social media. Here's Johanna, but then on the website, it's these bullet point product descriptions that who's going to want to take the time to read it unless you're I don't know a someone who is really into this craft and they just need to know that it matches. But ultimately, at that point, why would they want to buy your product versus uh, because you're definitely a little more expensive than going to a craft store, for example, that sells mass produces this stuff and that sort of thing. So I really appreciate how you come through in this message, and I think that would be an interesting question to ask if I was browsing your website or talking to you in person or observing you on Instagram or Facebook. Why would I want to buy from you? Like, so in just in a nutshell, what would be the reason that sets yourself apart? Because not only from your the other, I think you use the term indie dyers, those other people that are more or less direct competition, but also, we have the people here in the States like Joann's and Michael's and just other big box craft stores that also sell yarn. So what would set you apart from these two groups of competition?
Yeah, great question. So, as far as what sets me apart from big box stores and things, I always like to explain to people that for every product out there, there are tiers of products under that. So, like hamburgers, you can get a hamburger at McDonald's, Applebee's, and the American restaurant downtown, right? And they're
Mm-hmm.
all going to be a different price point. But at the end of the day, piece of meat and bun and some condiments. So, what makes McDonald's hamburger so much cheaper than the American restaurant? It's quality, it's experience, it's the atmosphere, it's what goes into it, where they source their meat from, all of those kinds of things. And there's a place and a time and a reason to get a McDonald's hamburger and an Applebee's hamburger and an American hamburger. All of
Mm-hmm.
them are good and fine. It's just, what are you trying to create? And so going into this business, I recognize that hand-dyed yarn is at the top end. It's considered a luxury product. Not everyone is able to afford it, and even the people that afford it aren't going to choose it every single time. I just always tell people the product that you're getting from me is going to be a higher quality. I have different fiber content. Most of the stuff you buy at Joann's and Hobby Lobby is machine produced. Well, it's all machine produced. There won't be any hand dyed yarn there, but it also, a lot of it is going to be synthetic. It's not real wool. And when you do get real wool, it's not high quality wool. It's not breed specific. So you can't plan to use merino in a project that would benefit from the extra elasticity that merino gives and the softness, as opposed to Jacob wool, which is much scratchier and rougher, but is great for outerwear because it repels water better and things like that. Each skein won't be a unique work of art like mine is, because mine is done by a human being by hand. It's created specifically by me for a specific market. As far as what sets me apart from other indie dyers, again, that goes back to creating my brand and sharing myself through the brand. People buy from me because I share my story, what makes me tick, what inspires me, what gets me excited. And again, going back to education, I offer value added services that a lot of other indie dyers don't offer. A lot of people don't have the time, energy, expertise, or desire to do a podcast or to write descriptions, or like in social media posts, I'll share knitting tips and tricks. And that's another thing that brings my customers back to me, because they know they can email me about a specific pattern and say, which of your yarns would you recommend? Which colors would look good in this pattern? Because I want to buy yarn. And I will take the time to go and do it. I will take time to like put skeins together and take a picture and email it to them and say, look, these two look beautiful together. You should use this in that pattern. And people can get that from me. They can't get that from Amazon. They can't get that from Hobby Lobby. They can't get that from the other buyer across town because she's too busy and doesn't take the time to connect with her customers.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's outstanding. Your willingness to, and just like you expressed and put it very well, that they're buying this product from Johanna Miller. They are, it's not this big box store. So as a result, though, and I've seen on your website how you do put yourself out there. For example, even the About Us page, it's in my experience, the About page is usually the number one page that is clicked on after arriving on the homepage. Your About Us page, or About Me, I can't remember the exact title of it, puts it very well. It puts out there that this is you, this is what you like, this is what you enjoy. It's what makes you tick. The challenge is, do we want to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable? And I say vulnerable. Obviously, I'm sure you have safeguards that you've put up, in putting boundaries there. But how has that made this connection? So obviously, you're being transparent and you're giving value out, which is pretty important nowadays. But how is this even like on the About Us page? How has that helped people be able to connect with you to realize that they are purchasing this product from a real living human being?
It's all about stories and sharing stories. And so when I share my story with people, it is so much easier to see that I'm a real person because they can connect. People look for their similarities with others, so they connect with their struggles. They connect with the things that they have in common with you. I share a lot of stuff about my house that's over 100 years old, and it's charming and sweet, but it's got some real issues because it's an old house, right? So I talk about that in my About Us page and on my social media a lot. And people love my cat that always shows up in the podcast. They love Phoebe more than they love me sometimes. They're always like, look, where's Phoebe? So
Yes.
I love that because they connect with you. They feel like they're part of your family. If people can care about you and care about your story, they want to support you. They don't care about Amazon because there's nothing to care about there.
Right.
Literally, it has its place, but there's no emotional connection. So if you can offer something more than Amazon, and that's what makes businesses in this day and age, it's so hard on the internet because Amazon offers free shipping, right? And all of these websites, even Etsy these days is offering like super fast free shipping and all of these things. And little tiny businesses can't compete with that. We can't afford to eat that shipping cost all the time. We can't afford to do this all the time. And so we really have to provide something else that those bigger companies cannot provide. And that's connection, and emotional connection with our customers is so important. They're going to care about your story and they're going to feel a part of your story. And the best way to get people on board is to make them feel a part of something.
That's absolutely. I couldn't have stated it better. I think It's incredible having that personal connection. And obviously, like you said, you strive for that personal connection, but also you do that through the value that you provide. So again, like with, I think you mentioned your podcast, you told me previously that how you engage with people on social media, how it's not just this one-sided thing. You respond to people, you help them, you're engaged in these groups, and then people know that they can support you through that. So I think that's really good. The action that we can take out of this is, how can we invest in the About Us page? How can we make sure that it does present this story? I'll have a couple of links in the show notes of some other places, including Post and Yarns, that have I think have pulled together an About Us page really nicely. They say who they are, and if nothing else, even if it's there's 10 people or 20 people or 100 people, whatever, having these individual faces says this is who you're buying from. It's not just this website. Hopefully the website looks nice, but it's not just a website. You're buying from people, and you're helping pay their bills, put food on their table, and it's that, like you said, it's that emotional connection. So I think that's really good. And I think you also mentioned that as a result of all of this work that you've put into it, so we've talked about the product descriptions and this emotional connection. I think you said that your return rate was less than 1%.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number because it's so small, but I sell hundreds, if not thousands, of skeins a year, and I've been in business for almost 3 years now. And in that amount of time, I think I've had 2 returns the entire 3 years of business, like people wanting to return. And I think in both cases, they didn't end up returning as much as exchanging once we started talking. And I was like, okay, well, can you tell me what the problem is? And I'll be happy to make that right for you. And we talk about it, and we come to find out that there's something else that would meet their needs better, and I can just exchange it for them and pay back any difference if there is any, or something like that. And also, I found that both of those people became more regular customers later because I handled the interaction well, and I was able to meet their needs and help them with that. And they were like, oh, I'm so happy with how that went, that then they come back to me the next time they need yarn, and they shop with me first. And so that's really, really important. But I think that really goes back a lot to the descriptions. I put a lot of work into my photos. I put a lot of work into my product descriptions because I want to take as much guesswork out as possible, so that customers don't feel like they got cheated when they get the real product in the mail. And so it's really important to take as much guesswork out as possible. And then your customers will let you know when you're doing a good job. And that's excellent to hear. And they'll probably let you know when you're doing a bad job too.
Of course.
And you need to
Yes.
that.
I understand. Yes. That's part of just being an entrepreneur, having your own business. You're kind of the point person for all that type of interaction. At least eventually it'll kind of wind up bubbling to the top there. So that's great. So I think we are getting close to wrapping it up here. I think my final question I'd like to ask and just hear your thoughts is, what would your biggest piece of advice be for say other fellow entrepreneurs, fellow merchants, content managers, as they manage the website, build it out, build the content on the website? What would you say just your best piece of advice is that you could share here with the audience?
Yeah, I think that for me, your content will create itself much easier and more organically when you find a bigger mission and connect with that. And what I mean by that is, I have talked about from day one at Post and Yarns, my goal obviously is to sell my hand-dyed yarn. I have a product and I want to sell it and make money. But I have a deeper goal that goes even more beyond that. And my deeper goal is to inspire people to create magic in their life. That's where Push came into play, and why I talk so much about magic and magical stuff in my business. I'm wanting people to learn that the magic is inside them and they can create it. So one of the things that I've just started doing the last few months on my social media is every Monday on Instagram and Facebook, I post a Monday gratitude post, and I talk about how I start the week better when I am thinking about the things I already have in abundance and the things I'm grateful for. And so let's start it on a positive note by thinking of at least one thing every week that we are grateful for that we already have. And so I'll share a pretty picture of yarn and then talk about something I'm grateful for. And so every Monday I post that, and I share something from my own life, which is being vulnerable and helping people connect. But also it's teaching people to do that themselves. And then I'll always either start or end the post with, so what about you? What are you grateful for? And how can you feel positive going into this week? And I get a lot of people sharing back, and people love that. I've had so much positive feedback from that, and people saying that they just love that. I've had people who don't buy yarn and don't knit or crochet or anything following my social media and chiming in on that and saying, I love this. This is helping me get in a positive frame of mind. And so I having a bigger goal like that, a bigger mission, something that is more meaningful that you can connect to and help your customers connect with is really important.
Wow. Yeah. That's I hear. I don't know if you've read it, but the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek. That's
Oh, I haven't.
exactly. Yeah. It's the whole why. What motivates you to keep going. That's yeah. That was a good good overview of what he says in that book. So that's great. Also, well, some Zig Ziglar in there too, and just yeah, exactly. And the nice thing is, like from a business perspective, as you're doing this every Monday, you're staying top of mind for your customers. But more than that, you are engaging with them. You are getting feedback from them. It's maintaining as much as you can. I'm sure it's tough with over social media, but you're engaging as much as you can on a very personal level. And I just wonder if that's a good portion of why you are successful in this. I appreciate you coming on, Johanna, and appreciate you taking the time to share from your very busy life. And so I want to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
It was a pleasure. It was definitely a pleasure. So if you are listening to Actionable Insights episode number 6, I want to invite you to go to the website actionableinsights.fm to read show notes. So as what we talked about here in this episode today boiled down into a text format, so you can read, you can understand, see even some screenshots, some pictures of what we are talking about. Really, really detailed show notes. If you have not already, please subscribe to our the podcast on Apple, on Google, on Spotify, etc. Wherever the major podcast indicators are, you should be able to find Actionable Insights, a podcast for content managers and merchants. And always, if you feel like it, please, I would love a 5-star review. That would make my day. So thank you for listening today. It was great having you on. It was great having Johanna Miller here with Potion Yarns. And I hope that you got a lot of good value out of this. Talk to you next time.